Hey everyone, and welcome to day 24 of Lent. Today's passages are going to be focused on Hebrews chapter 9 and Jeremiah 31. Pause the video and read both passages if you can. Today's goal is to really know the differences between the Old Covenant and the New Covenant, and to really understand that Jesus establishing the New Covenant is so much better. And if we look at Hebrews, we know that similarly to what Paul writes in the epistles, Christ is going to be the main way to salvation, rather than strictly following all the rules and regulations that are kind of listed in the Old Testament, which is essentially considered the Old Covenant, or the Old Promise that God made with Israelite forefathers. And this Old Covenant is essentially a contract between the people of Israel and God when he freed them out of Egypt. And it essentially contains all these instructions about how to live religiously, politically, and socially. And the book of Hebrews is telling us that Jesus is now the new covenant, or the new promise that was enacted as a result of his death. So really it's this idea of the old covenant versus the new covenant, and Hebrews is showing us that all these commandments in the old covenant that are all listed out in the Old Testament are a representation of our salvation in Jesus Christ, the new covenant. And so one such representation about Jesus from the Old Covenant is this idea of the tabernacle, which is really well described in the Old Testament, especially in Exodus. If you read the description of the tabernacle, you can see that it has many parts to it with specific instructions on how to build each item. And the tabernacle was essentially a portable temple as Israel journeyed through the wilderness. The tabernacle also included a holy place and the most holy place. And the most holy place was divided from the holy place by a veil or a curtain. And within the tabernacle, there was also a high priest who was the only one among the priests to enter the most holy place. And he was even only allowed to enter the most holy place once a year on a day called the Day of Atonement, in which he would offer the blood sacrifice of an animal and incense for the sins of the people and for himself. The problem with this sacrifice is that it's mainly a ritual that can only fix the outward guilt and shame of our sins, but really doesn't change the heart of the sinner, and really causes no change for sinners to turn back from their ways. Hebrews 9 is telling us that Christ's sacrifice on the cross is the fulfillment of the tabernacle that was described in the Old Covenant. It's the representation of the tabernacle to its fullest form. And with Christ's sacrifice, the veil or curtain was torn, and now there is nothing separating us from our connection with our Father. Christ is now that high priest that is able to connect us to the most holy of holies, aka God's presence. And no longer do the people need to offer these animal sacrifices as a blood sacrifice, since Jesus himself was that blood sacrifice, the one and only perfect sacrifice that would never have to be repeated again, and is better than any other type of animal sacrifice. Jesus himself is also a better high priest because he himself was also free of sin. You take all this combined and we can see that Christ is a way better version of the tabernacle, or in essence, the true fulfillment of everything the tabernacle was supposed to represent. He is now initiating this new contract with us that can allow us for more influential change in our hearts so that we can pursue God with a new motivation. And this is where today's Jeremiah 31 passage comes into play, and I just want to read verses 31 to 34. The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their ancestors when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they broke my covenant, though I was a husband to them. This is the covenant I will make with the people of Israel after that time. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will they teach their neighbor or say to one another, "Know the Lord," because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more. We can see in this Jeremiah passage that this new covenant that God will establish with Christ will have some big implications. As we can see in verse 33, it's not going to lead to superficial changes that the old covenant provided, but real changes in the minds and hearts of those who pursue God. We can also see that this new covenant with Christ will enable us to experience His grace, as there will be forgiveness of our sins with no laws or requirements to fulfill on our end. It's something that God will freely give to us. I hope as we continue this Lent season that we can remember that the only way to salvation is not by anything that we can do on our own, but only through Christ and Christ alone, who fulfilled everything the old covenant was to establish and has now established a new covenant with us that can allow us to be in the presence of God through the faith that Christ's sacrifice on the cross was enough. Thank you and have a blessed day.